degrees Fahrenheit, preventing the accumulation of water vapor that would otherwise form clouds and produce rainfall. The ELF waves HAARP produces bounce off the ionosphere and are able to curve around the Earth over the horizon to the ground, making any point on the globe well within reach.
One of the dangers in spreading chemtrails is that it acts as a desiccant and further dries the air. In other words, these chemical particulates can dry up the atmosphere and induce drought.
Imagine the effects of chemtrails on the battlefield, causing extended droughts in enemy countries, drying up their resources, forcing surrender. Just as terrifying is another form of weather being weaponized, rain, that can trigger devastating floods and wipe cities clean off the map.
If you can make it rain, you can have a profound effect on the battlefield.
One of the critical elements in launching a weatherized battle is being able to control rain and unleash floods.
The military have had a keen interest in the weather basically since day one. There have been a number of times the military have actually succeeded in developing technology to use the weather.
In history, there is a chilling example of a flood that may have been accidentally triggered with a weather weapon. August 15th, 1952, near the small town of Lynmouth, England, a massive rainstorm strikes. The river swells. Scores die.
It's estimated that 250 times as much rain fell in a period of 24 hours as normally fell in the entire month.
The East Lynn and West Lynn rivers flood their banks. According to the BBC, 90 million tons of water sweep down into the town of Lynmouth.
35 people were killed.
Bodies wash out to sea and are never found. Trees are uprooted, forming dams behind bridges, creating walls of water that carry huge boulders into the village, destroying shops, hotels, and homes. Was this just a freak act of nature? The prevailing theory is that it may have been a British military experiment gone bad, as they had been known to be conducting cloud seeding tests around that same time.
The British military would be experimenting with cloud seeding for the same reason as any government or military, because if you can control the weather, if you can make it rain, you can have a profound effect on the battlefield.
Allegedly, early on the morning of August 15th, 1952, some witnesses had reported seeing Royal Air Force jets flying in the area, at times disappearing from sight high above the cloud deck. Were they on a routine training mission? Or, as some people speculate, were they dumping payloads of silver iodide into the clouds? Silver iodide is one of the most common chemicals used for cloud seeding. It forces the tiny ice crystals that make up the cloud to fuse together. Once enough tiny ice crystals fuse together, they become heavy and fall to the earth in the form of rain. And on that fateful day in August of 1952, rain fell in record amounts. Did the Royal Air Force embark on daring cloud seeding experiments without the public's knowledge?
Some people reported seeing aircraft undertaking strange maneuvers, and it subsequently emerged that there was an experiment codenamed Operation Cumulus, which was indeed an attempt at weather modification. Interestingly, many of the documents relating to Operation Cumulus have disappeared and are not available from the National Archives.
Little over a decade later, the U.S. military conducted experiments to bring weather to the battlefield. October 1966. The Vietnam War is in full swing. U.S. military scientists are devising a way to slow down enemy forces using the weather.
U.S. had gone from advisor status to in-field combat status, and were not doing well. As a result of not being able to make progress on the ground, the U.S. went to bringing the battle into the atmosphere above the battlefield.
The Air Force employed a groundbreaking military directive called Project Popeye.
Project Popeye was a weather modification program that involved cloud seeding, and the idea was to produce or exaggerate the monsoon rains that are traditional in that region.
Experiments are carried out beforehand with the military aircraft dropping silver iodide crystals in clouds over a strip of the Laos Panhandle, east of the Belovans Plateau in the Sekong River Valley. 50 cloud seeding runs are conducted. 82% of the clouds seeded produce rain within a brief period.
So Project Popeye then became Operation Popeye. It became a proper military program during the Vietnam War.
The goal of Operation Popeye was to extend the monsoon season and create an inordinate amount of rainfall by seeding clouds over the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was the primary supply route by which the North Vietnamese Army really supplied its troops that were operating in combat forces operating in South Vietnam, as well as supplying the Viet Cong. So it was the most significant logistical center of gravity to the North Vietnamese, and it was an important strategic objective for the United States and our ally South Vietnam to try to interdict that supply line to cut off those supplies to the enemy.
Operation Popeye's objectives are to soften road surfaces on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, cause landslides along roadways, and wash out river crossings.
The military had their own catchphrase as a result of this program, and it was "Make mud, not war."
They flew over 2,600 missions from a period of 1966 to 1972, and it's believed that it did exacerbate the amount of rainfall and probably extended the monsoon season by 30 to 45 days.
It had limited success. They did succeed in generating rain. They did succeed in turning the Viet Cong resupply route into a quagmire of mud. It didn't slow them down a bit. They were bringing the stuff in on bicycles and they just slogged through the mud.
Operation Popeye showed that weather can be brought to the battlefield as rain, but can it also be weaponized in the form of a hurricane? Some say it already has.
Some people believe that Katrina was weather warfare at its most potent.
Weather has been used on the battlefield with only limited success. But the technology is already here, paving the way for a bleak future once it's perfected. And some historians point to one haunting incident as proof. August 23, 2005. The National Weather Service is tracking an unassuming storm forming over the Bahamas. A storm this size rarely damages buildings or even takes lives. In fact, at this point, it's simply known as Tropical Depression 12. But that will change. It will unexpectedly grow into the mother of all storms, a Category 5 hurricane, with winds up to 175 miles per hour. It is named Hurricane Katrina. When Katrina slams into the Gulf Coast states, it will become one of the deadliest disasters in U.S. history, costing $81 billion in property damage and claiming more than 1,800 lives. Like other hurricanes of that year, Katrina showed some very peculiar movements never before seen in a major hurricane.
The 2005 hurricane season, there were some very amazing, strange anomalies. There were some things that should not have happened. One of the things was that many of the hurricane tracks were in almost straight lines, and hurricanes don't go in straight lines.
An ominous theory has surfaced that seems far-fetched.
There are some extremely sinister conspiracy theories circulating about Hurricane Katrina. Some people believe that Katrina hit where it hit with the power that it struck because of Russian or Chinese weather control experiments.
Just before coming on shore, Katrina did an abrupt 90-degree turn, hard left, and went down the beach for a substantial distance before coming on shore. So we have speculations that our enemies have been throwing hurricanes at us. We were being bombarded, attacked with the weather.
So far, there has been no conclusive proof of such a conspiracy. Most attribute Katrina's path to the vagaries of a hurricane, but it does illustrate the potential of such a weapon.
To control and direct a hurricane gives you power at least equivalent to nuclear weapons. A hurricane could be the ultimate weapon of war.
The very next year after Katrina, something strange happened. According to the National Weather Service, not a single hurricane made landfall in 2006. Could the U.S. military be using HAARP to fend off hurricane attacks? An irregular high-pressure zone above the southeastern United States points to this conclusion, according to Jerry Smith.
This high-pressure dome has never existed before. It's never been seen to have a high-pressure dome parked over the southeast United States for the entirety of a hurricane season. It's never happened before. And it's happened 3 years in a row now. This high-pressure dome worked like the rubber bumpers on a pinball machine, and every hurricane, like a pinball, hit it and bounced off, safely going back out to sea. The date coincidence of HAARP being completed and this buffer being in effect, I think, is very telling.
Meteorologists say the high-pressure area is just a weather anomaly, one of many that occurs in nature. But its intensity puzzles many meteorologists. Is this the same type of manufactured high-pressure system that experts feel hovered over California from 1988 to 1992? Today, nations still deny they are weaponizing weather, but there are suggestions to the contrary. This U.S. Air Force report graphically outlines the military's desire to exploit and manipulate the weather for the purposes of war by the year 2025. According to one of the most harrowing lines in this report, quote, "Weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of war-fighting environments."
The 2025 report on weather was essentially a military analysis of what could we do, whether it was to create rainfall, create drought conditions. The idea was by 2025 we would be able to manipulate virtually every aspect of weather.
It expressly states how and why the United States Air Force should own the weather. What technologies will be necessary to fight future wars using weather as a weapon.
The rationale for this is really the ultimate war is if you never have to fire a round and nobody ever knew you launched the fight. And this is what weather warfare offers militaries around the world.
With our deadline of 2025 quickly approaching, the future of weather warfare is cause for concern.
The worst-case scenario is that satellite-based weapons systems will turn the Earth's weather on its head. It could rain in the desert, and you could have a heat wave in the Arctic.
If an enemy could change the jet stream over North America, it could plunge North America into an ice age.
50 years from now, geophysical manipulation of the planet could be the weapon of war, where it's not bombs and bullets,